So we're going to do field maps today, which is a lot of fun and one of my personal favorites. But again, as we do with all our workshops, we tell you a little bit about who we are and who we serve. And we are a statewide program within the University of California Division of Agricultural and Natural Resources and UCANR. And some of you may be part of UCANR and new to UCANR. And if so, I'm super excited that you're here. UCANR it delivers programs on agriculture, natural resources, nutrition, and youth development. And we are an extensive network throughout California of cooperative extension offices, research and extension centers, and affiliated campuses. And we are all, people doing work for California. And our particular flavor of that work, this group that's hosting this, which is the Informatics and GIS program, our particular flavor is all mapping. So we do these training, we do GIS services, we do research, we fly drones, but it's all to help you do your work better and to incorporate the power of spatial data and analysis into your existing work. So we're thrilled you're here. And this is who we are. I'm Maggie Kelly. I'm the director of the IGIS program. I'm based at Berkeley. Sean Hogan is going to be leading you in the hands-on workshop. And then behind the scenes, we've got other folks who are going to be able to help you if you have problems. So if you need any help, just reach out and chat. We've got Andy Lyons, Shane Fire, Ben Satzman, and Robert will not be here today. He's under the weather, but we've got three wonderful people who can help you out when you need help. And who you are, I usually make a map for these workshops from the registration, and I clearly picked the wrong registration, but I think most of you are from California. But if you're not on this map, it's my apologies. I mea culpa. But if you would, in the chat, if you could tell us your name, and if you could tell us briefly what you hope to get from this workshop, but at least tell us your level of experience with field data collection with field maps. So 1 being beginner, 5 being expert. And if you want to give us your experience with other than field maps, that's fine too. But just, does somebody want to get started? Let me open up my chat here and see what we've got. Anybody want to offer up your, why can I not see chat? I think chats are happening, but I can't see them. Zoom is flummoxing me today. Can I just get a check-in? Can you guys hear me and see me?
You sound good.
Okay, good.
See
I can't see the chat, so I see it's happening. But welcome, you guys. We're thrilled to have you. I'm going to carry on. Keep the threads going in the chat about yourself. So we're going to do field maps today, and you might ask, why field maps? We always start with this, well, why this particular technology? And you might want to use field maps because you want to collect GPS data in the field. You want to collect points, lines, polygons, adding content. Say if your point is a tree, something about crown condition, you might want to add a photograph to that point. You might want to delineate a fence line or a meadow, these kinds of things. You might want to add records to that table for these features, these points, lines, and polygons, say for a monitoring program. So you go back to the tree, you go back to the fence line. You might want to use your mobile device in the field. You might want to collect georeferenced photographs in the field. And this is one great improvement with field maps. I find it so easy and it makes it really seamless. You might need to work offline on occasion. You might need to add your data that you've gathered in the field to an existing database, your existing GIS database. You might want to make gorgeous and useful web maps and web apps that use your field data. And the core is you want to do all of this easily without having to burden yourself with multiple instruments, multiple software steps. It really should be kind of intuitive. And that's what Esri's working towards with this field map software, and we really like it. But it doesn't do everything. It's not a navigation tool, so you wouldn't queue up field maps on your phone to navigate to the closest cafe or whatever. It's not really, it doesn't really serve that purpose. It's not a great citizen science tool or a participatory tool because it requires an organizational license. It's designed particularly for members of an organization who collect data for that organization. Esri does have other options for, crowdsourcing, citizen science, participatory data sets. And if you want us to talk about those, we'd be happy to. But we're going to focus on field maps today. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to give you a little example to my field maps obsession, which is wandering. Well, it started in lockdown, and I've just been using field maps every time I go out of the house on a walk, which has been fun. I'll tell you a little bit about Esri, a little bit about working in the cloud, because that's where we're going to be, and some background. What are web maps? What are web apps? How do we think about data in the cloud? Some of this is review if you've gone through a series of our workshops. We'll talk about the workflow for field maps. We'll talk about what it looks like in the field and some details about if you want to hook up to an external GPS to get better than your cell phone's GPS. And then we'll break and turn it over to the hands-on stuff. So as usual, I'm going to go through kind of the background, setting the stage, the context, and a little bit about the theory, and then we'll launch into the action. So I have been obsessed with walking around Berkeley and collecting data as I go. And this is an example of my, on the left is my web map that I've made. On the right is my web app. And the lines on this are just my tracks as I walk through Berkeley. They're color coded according to their recentness. The picture on the right is a web app. I can send that to people. I can look at it on my phone. It's a live web application that's constantly pulling data from the database that I have created using the field maps on my cell phone. The picture on the left is the web map that I use to create that web app. That's where I can customize the color. I can create, how I want this thing to look. I can change the color scheme. I can turn layers on and off. I can do those kind of GIS visualization stuff. So I use my web map to organize all my layers, and I can publish it to a web app where I can add widgets or say, I want to be able to add these sorts of things, or I want to be able to share this on LinkedIn. I used to have a Twitter button there, but I took it off because we know what's going on. We don't actually know, but maybe we'll know in a week. So this is what, this is just an example, but think about this as, whatever you're doing, you're collecting fields or fence lines or, whatever it is, this is how you're going to do it. And everything I've showed you in that previous picture was built using these Esri tools. And Esri looks something like this. It's a massive software ecosystem, and it has as its core a desktop application called ArcGIS Pro. And you load that software onto your desktop. It's all PC, all Windows based. You can do some very intense and complicated and sophisticated GIS. You can also work in the parallel version of ArcGIS, which is called ArcGIS Online. That's the cloud-based platform for Esri GIS. And in ArcGIS Online, you can connect a lot of these software apps to have a much richer experience with GIS. And one of those apps is Field Maps, and that's what we're going to use today. Another app in the cloud is called Experience Builder. Some of the names are kind of fun. So Experience Builder is another app that runs in ArcGIS Online in the cloud, and that's what I used to customize my web map to make it a web app. And we're going to walk you through all this stuff. So again, this Esri ecosystem or constellation of software is organized around a local software, which is ArcGIS Pro, and a cloud-based software, which is ArcGIS Online. and they have parallel goals and abilities, but they have some differences. So the strengths of Pro are, if you want to do cartography, really great design control. If you want to look, really pay attention to your projections, which I'm going to touch on in a moment. If you want to do some advanced analysis like image processing, spatial modeling, if you want to work with UAV data and LiDAR, and if you want to do a lot of coding for reproducibility, you might be more comfortable in Pro. In contrast, ArcGIS Online strengths are creating these things like web maps and web apps, links to loads of these other apps like field maps and experience builder I just mentioned in the previous slide, but there's loads more. If you want to do simple analysis, but more and more is being added all the time. So stay tuned. You know, the goal really here is to make the desktop obsolete and to make cloud-based GIS the thing of the future. We're nowhere near that yet, but you could see where we're going. ArcGIS Online is very fast, it's very intuitive, it's browser-based, it's a fantastic tool. Both of these, Pro and ArcGIS Online, allow access to loads and loads of spatial data. And so when we're working in the cloud, which we will be today in ArcGIS Online and on the associated apps, we want to be thinking about a few things, because if you have some traditional GIS background, you were probably taught on a desktop software, and there are certain rules that no longer apply when we move from desktop to the cloud. And some of the things we should think about are data. What does data look like in the cloud? Sharing, how do we share our data? Because when we're in the cloud, that's the first thing we're going to ask is who can use this data? How can I share it? We don't necessarily think about that when we're at the local desktop. We're going to touch on projections because things can get a little loosey-goosey in the cloud with regard to projections. We can think about the products we can make, and these are really the web apps and the web maps, and I want to touch on those again. And then analysis. I've mentioned that, the more robust type of analysis is typically done locally, but that is changing. And then visualization. What sort of things can we, how can we visualize data in spatial data when we're working in the cloud? So the first thing to talk about is data. And there's lots of ways to think about this, and I've tried to boil it down a little bit, but on the left, we've got local file formats. And if you were brought up in traditional GIS, these are familiar to you. These are data file formats that are stored on your computer locally. Things like shape files and all those associated files that come with them, or grids for raster data and all the associated kind of folders that come with a grid, or more contemporary version, geodatabase format, where you can store vector data like points, lines, and polygons, as well as raster data, as well as tables, and for vector data, the topology that defines all of the vector data. So you can have all of those in your local, they're stored locally on your hard drive. But when we move to the cloud, we're really thinking about data differently. And so cloud-based data, we can think about, oh, I've gone to a website and they've said, okay, here's some website, and you can download it, and it's basically a zipped shape file. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about these cloud native data formats. These are what are readily consumable data formats designed for the cloud, and they consist of layers and services. That's the new terminology. Layers are the data and the symbology that goes with it, and services are the instructions on how they're going to be used. And Esri has the following 5 typical layer types: feature layer. They also have elevation layer, image layer, vector tile layer, and scene layer. And you can think about these kind of things translating. So if you pushed, say, a shape file up to the cloud from your local desktop, it would become a feature layer. And if you pushed a grid up to the cloud, it might become an elevation layer or an image layer. So just bear that in mind as we go through this. When we start when we work with field maps, we can start in Pro or we can start in ArcGIS Online, and the data types are going to be a little bit different. So data in the cloud, like I said, when you work with cloud-based layer, and we're going to see this when we open up ArcGIS Online, you're going to have a table of contents in your ArcGIS Online store, and these are just some examples here, and they're going to tell you what kind of data they are. And so these are just some examples. I've got here a hosted feature layer and its service definition. So that's that layer and services together. And you could also get when you create a layer in ArcGIS Online, you get this hosted feature layer that includes the service. So we no longer talk about shapefiles or grids. We don't even really talk about vector and raster very much. We're really talking about these layers and then what you can do with them, which are the services. Esri has lots of places for you to find data, and two of the most common and really the quickest place I usually go to find data are these two Esri sources. One is called ArcGIS Online, and that is a place, sort of a library of spatial data that ArcGIS Online users have pushed up and made available to us. And the one on the right is ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World. And that's a much more curated and kind of cleaned up data library, but it's a great place to start. But a lot of the services associated with the data on the Living Atlas constrain them from use. So sometimes if you download or you're using some data from Living Atlas and you say, I can't do anything with it, I can't work with it, it's because the services have constrained it that way. And then I always go to ArcGIS Online and see if I can find a duplicate. So just a backdrop. Another thing we have to talk about quickly is projections, and you've done this before in GIS class, so I'm only going to touch on it a bit. The big picture is when we take the world, our beautiful spheroid, and we try to map it on a flat space, we have to have a projection. So we have to stretch that three-dimensional surface into a two-dimensional surface. And the Earth is in a sphere, and it's sort of ellipsoid, but it isn't even ellipsoid because it's pretty bumpy. So there's no perfect way to turn that 3D shape into a 2D shape. So there's lots of projections. There's global projections, and there's regional projections, and there's local projections, and they all have some kind of distortion associated with them. And so your choice going into GIS is to really think about, do I care about projections? Do I need to pay attention to this? And most of the data you encounter in the cloud is going to be called Web Mercator, which isn't the best for analysis because it has some distortions, particularly in area. Some things are stretched. But normally when we're working the cloud, we kind of just ignore this and sort of move on. But if projections are important to you and you're doing field work that requires a lot of precision, and you're going to need to, pay some attention to this and put some controls on your data and make sure that you're not introducing distortions, you do want to think about projections. And the best way to do that is to start locally at Pro and, create a data file in Pro, and then push it up to ArcGIS Online. If you start in ArcGIS Online, my understanding is the default projection is Web Mercator. And these graphics on the bottom are just, in California, you're commonly going to get data in what's called geographic, which just means one latitude is equal to one longitude, which is a terrible projection for analysis. And so we don't ever use that. And so barring that geographic, we have Teal Albers, which is a statewide projection, which a lot of statewide data comes in this Teal Albers, and it's pretty decent. We also have UTM, Universal Transverse Mercator. That's what we in IGIS commonly work in. And California has 2 zones for UTM. And then there's a third common projection called State Plane, which has 7 zones. And just for your information, error declines as you move to the right on these charts. So the smaller the zone that you're converting from 3D to 2D, the smaller your error. But we typically work in this UTM projection. Okay, so sharing, we need to think about sharing when we work in the cloud. When we work locally, we don't. We sort of just, if we share it, we just send somebody a zipped file. But when we're in the cloud, we can share our data, and we decide how data is going to be shared. And Esri makes this very easy. You can share data with just yourself, so nobody else. You can share the data with groups. So in your organization, you can set up a group. Like I have a group for my class, we have a group in ArcGIS, and we have subgroups on projects. You can share data with your whole organization, or you can share data with everyone, make it public. Let's chat a little bit about workflow. And again, these diagrams are schematic, and they're here as kind of an organizer, but don't worry if they don't make any sense, because this is what we're going to walk through in class. But the idea is you're going to be in ArcGIS Online. You are going to be working with hosted feature layers. You're going to be doing some configuration that tells, this data set can be edited, etc. You're going to be working in Field Maps, the app within ArcGIS Online. Sean's going to go through this. You're going to push your data into a web map via something called Web Map Viewer. And then you can create a web app via Experience Builder, like I did. When you're out in the field, you're going to be using field maps on your phone. You're going to load that map that you created, that web map that you created, and you're going to start adding data to it. And that data that you're adding is going to go back into your database and refresh your web app and refresh your web app. You can also start in Pro, you can start locally, and that's what I was saying. If you need to really control projections, you can start creating your data in Pro, push it up to ArcGIS Online, and then the workflow is similar. When you're going to add data to a web map, this is just an alert. Esri tends to create new versions of its own software and keep them running at the same time. So there is, Sean will go through this, but there's now a couple versions of Web Map Viewer. There's Web Map Viewer Classic and Web Map Viewer. And now that I realize, I don't think I've updated the slide. I might have gotten this muddled. Sean will clarify it. So you want to make sure you use the right web map viewer when you're working in this workshop. But anyway, you're going to create a web map that's going to get pushed out to your phone or your mobile device. You're going to load field maps, and you're going to be off to the races. Yeah, this is just saying what I just said. What used to be called Web Map Viewer is now called Web Map Viewer Classic, and what used to be called Web Map Viewer Beta is now Web Map Viewer. Sean will go through all this. I get tangled up in it. Okay, so what does it look like in the field? This is my phone. I got all my mapping stuff on one place. You're going to open your field maps. You're going to load the web map that you created. You're going to say add, and I'm showing you snapshots from my walking tour. There's an add data button. You can start, adding data. You can control the GPS accuracy. You can say, I want this to be really, really refined. It might not take a point as much as you want, but you can loosen up the GPS tolerance, if it's not picking up enough points. You can check out the accuracy that you've got. If you've exceeded your tolerance, it'll give you a message to that effect. When you see something you want to take a photo of, right? Because this is when this first spring of pandemic, I was obsessed with the flowers in Berkeley. So I would be wandering around and taking pictures of springtime flowers. The picture capability is really terrific. Every photograph gets geocoded to the point, to where you are standing. This photograph is now part of your database. I also would like to mention that the GPS on your phone is not the best. It is decent, but it does, it's not what we would call survey grade by any means. It's recreation grade, but it's not even as good as some external GPSs. So you might think about adding an external GPS if you need to in the field. And this slide is a little primer on GPS devices. From the left, we're going to go super expensive. To the right, less expensive. So on the left, we've got these standalone GPS options. These are survey grade, about 1 meter accuracy. The biggest company that sells these is Trimble. They run from 5 to, maybe 20K. These are standalone. You're not connecting these to your phone. You're just using them. You're downloading that data to your GPS. Then in the middle, we've got sort of a hybrid option where you have your mobile device and then you have an antenna that the Trimble model is a subscription model. So you can pay monthly subscription to get a really good signal and have that signal pumped into your mobile device. The third option here on the right are devices that use a Bluetooth connection with your mobile device, and they work with Apple and Android. And the ones that I really like are these Bad Elves, and they start at very, very modest, $300, $600 for the Surveyor model, and then about 3 to 5K for the Bad Elf Flex. And that Bad Elf Flex gives you just about as accurate information as some of those Trimbles on the left. And they're automatically hooked into your mobile device, and they're a lot of fun. So when you do have external devices, you connect you get your Bad Elf up and running, and then instead of using the integrated GPS in your phone, you just connect to this Bad Elf Bluetooth signal, and it's really makes a difference. But don't forget your external battery, because they do suck a lot of juice. This is just a quick example, from some of my with the iPhone's internal GPS. You can see sometimes it bounces around. It's not great, but with the external GPS, you get much more accurate. And then you collect your data in the field. Your file is updated automatically. Any web apps and web maps that you've made will be updated in Pro. The data is updated too. You can work with that data in Pro and save it, and those saves those actions will be cascade through your database. So the workflow, we're going to start with some hosted feature layers. We're going to push them into, we're going to create web maps via web map viewers, and then we're going to create web apps via the experience builder. And so with that, we'll turn it over to Sean. Sean, what would you like to do? Break or immediately get started?
Actually, that's a good question. And what I'm thinking is that this would be a good chance to make sure that everybody has their ArcGIS Online account set up. So is there anyone here that doesn't have ArcGIS Online? We sent out a couple emails this week, three emails to request a license through our UCANR software request link. But if for any reason that you weren't able to do that, we have Shane Fire here. He is our all licenses account manager, and he can get you set up really quickly. So if you need an account, speak up now. There's not too many people here today. Normally I would say go ahead and put things in the chat, but being that we don't have a giant group, you can just ask about it right now. And if no one needs an account, then I can go through a quick orientation before we take a break. Oh, okay. So you can unmute. Generally, you'll want to stay muted just in case someone's dog's barking in the background or something like that. But if you have a question, then you can either put it in the chat. That's usually what we recommend. And then one of the team can relay that to me, or we have frequent enough breaks that you can go ahead and ask your questions. Good. All right. So I was chuckling there, a couple of things that Maggie was saying about like the differences in naming conventions from ESRI. Maggie was shaking her head. Things change so much. They have so many divergent ways that their developers are going. Sometimes it throws me off too. And so it's kind of funny when we did what our names are and what our level is with field maps. I humbly put in a 4.5, not because I'm not really comfortable with field maps, is because there's little changes that occur in the workflow pipeline that break things later on in field maps. And I noticed that a lot of people actually have experience with this. There's a number of threes or so in the that have experience with this, and some comments about how it can be glitchy, particularly when it comes to forms. And I can definitely appreciate that. There's a number of little things that glitch. It's funny that they changed it from map viewer beta to map viewer, because it still feels like a beta to me, because little things that you change there then will cascade glitches down into the field map application later on. And so we'll try to address that. And we actually have a pretty elegant workflow for developing your survey forms for field maps that then can be displayed within Experience Builder. Today, we're going to be looking at or using 4, maybe 5 different apps. So where there's Esri, will look at the constellation of peripheral apps or associated apps that Esri has. But today we'll be working with ArcGIS Online, because that's kind of the hub for data management and even doing your web mapping in a lot of cases with the traditional way of going about web mapping. We'll be looking at the map viewer, formerly map viewer beta, which is one of the divergent directions for creating web maps. Not to be confused with web mapping applications. Web maps are the underlying organization of your features, your points, lines, polygons, your background base maps. Sometimes you'll have image tiles in there, but we won't be getting into that today. But your web map is the basic map. A web mapping application, though, can have those things like legends and well, you wouldn't put a north arrow on a web map generally, but you could have all kinds of different widgets. You can have time sliders. You can have all these different web mapping elements that you can add to your map that are like infographics and that sort of thing. So we won't have to dive into that too much. If you've had a chance to join us for our ArcGIS Online workshop before, that's a great kind of primer to this, and we will be running that again in the spring. We'll also be working with the field maps online application, to not be confused with the mobile application that was suggested within the emails, the preparatory emails earlier this week. So what I mean there is that once you've created your features and you organize things in ArcGIS Online, and then you've pushed it out to or brought it into your map viewer, then there's a stage where you can control some settings for your forms within an online web application that is also called field maps. Like I said, I was chuckling when Maggie was mentioning, there's like, yeah, the way the names are like, they're so close together. I don't know. It seems like there could be a more intuitive way of going about it. But anyways, so we will be then using the web map application for field maps to control some things like your cascading select of your form questions that would come up on your mobile app, which will be the next thing that we work with. So the mobile app is really the simplest part. Once you have it all set up online in these other environments, if it works, it'll just come right up on as an option on your field maps mobile application, where it should be intuitively easy to collect data outside. We'll practice with that. And then finally, after we've gone through that, we'll come back to the computer and create something that can be shared with anyone. You can share it. You can put it on a website. So you can plug it in as like an iframe, or you can send the URL to your mom and they can look at it, or your boss. And so we'll develop that more full-fledged kind of website like experience with infographics and the widgets and so forth in the experience builder. Will be the fourth of the applications we're using. And then finally, for anyone that feels like hanging on at the end, I have a little 5-minute segment that I do where I can show how you can bring this data into ArcGIS Pro really easy, because as Maggie mentioned, that's kind of the environment where you can really tweak things with your projections and you have much more kind of creative license to work with your cartography in that area for something like a publication. And I'm talking like a publication of like a journal or something like that. So anyway, that is what we'll be covering today. 4 apps for sure, and then ArcGIS Pro as a bonus. And where I was, again, coming back to where I was chuckling, is there can be some little, one thing is not quite right. If one thing is not quite right in one of those stages, the effect might not appear until you're trying to use it on your mobile app or in your experience builder. And so I'll try to circumnavigate any of those kind of issues. Speaking of that, and that's when to get back to what we were just talking about before, if anyone has an ArcGIS Online account that is not part of UCANR, you may run into glitches. Every single time I do a new workshop like this, I go back and I watch the video of the last workshop to kind of avoid the issues that came up before that were problems. And the number one biggest issue with this workshop is people's licenses not working. So you might want to throw in the comments if you're using an organizational account that is not through UCANR. The other thing is too, we have at one stage in the workshop, I can share within our organization a collaborative tree identification app. Oh, there, someone spotlighted me. Good. So yeah, we have a collaborative hosted feature layer that we can share, but only within our organization. That's one of the limitations of field maps, or for that matter, Collector is another one of the I wouldn't call it a predecessor to field maps. It's also another divergent Esri product. Field maps came afterwards and absorbed most of the functionality of Collector, but the same thing applies for that. You can when there's certain things will just won't work if you want to do like crowdsource. If you want to share this with everybody in the population, they won't be able to use it because they have to have a Esri license, and specifically they have to have an organizational account within the same organization. Typically, there are exceptions to this with things like the Survey 123, which has a public viewing one that's much more simplified, but those are just different field data collection apps, so we won't dive into today. But I wanted to mention them because it is important that you know that this isn't the only way that you can do this, and even more so, just not the only way you can do it within the Esri constellation of apps. All right, without further ado, let's jump into a little teeny bit of a show and tell. This first stuff that I'm going to cover here is not something that you actually have to get your hands dirty with. It's just to kind of give you a little basic orientation for a couple things. And also a little bit of house cleaning about how I recommend setting up your windows, because that's one of the biggest issues that most people have. A couple things. One, if you don't have a trackball or a mouse and you're trying to use the pad on your laptop right now, I'd recommend trying to go find a mouse or a trackball, because it's really hard to do a lot of the things that we're doing without something like that. You need the roller ball and the roller wheel on your mouse or your trackball to be able to scroll in and out in a lot of cases, and then click and drag things. It's just not, really, really cumbersome if you don't have that. So if you got one, you can grab that at the next break. Another thing is setting up your windows. And that's a big issue because we only have so much real estate on our screen. And what I'm going to do is share my screen right now before I forget. Good. And what I recommend is throwing the exercise information. This is in Google Docs for me, just in case I want to make any changes as we're going through the workshop. You should have a PDF that I sent out at 11:12 today so that you can have a PDF of this. I'm going to be running through the workshop exercise mostly from memory. I might kind of look back at this once in a while just to remember what I name things and that sort of thing, but I'll be running through the exercise mostly from memory here, but you might want to have the exercise off to the side as well, just in case you want to refer to it. And because I'll slowly be scrolling through this to find to kind of look for cues of the next thing that I need to cover so I don't get out of order, which I sometimes will do for the sake of making sure that we stay on track for time. But also it's when all of us, I think, when any of the folks here in IGIS give a workshop, we want to try to convey to you all the things that we wish that we knew when we first started doing this stuff. And there's a lot of little kind of tangents that I sometimes go off to, or we can go off on when it's related to some of the steps in this that aren't really explicitly explained through the exercise, just kind of additional information that's valuable to understand, so that I will go off track and then circle back to where we're at and continue from there when it's important. So again, I'll be going by memory, but I will also I'll kind of, I won't say wander off, but I'll cover things that aren't on here as well, and then limit some of the things that are on there for the sake of, again, telling you the things I wish that I knew when I first started. All right, so the directions, I recommend putting them over to the left. The main window that you'll be working on is, I put that somewhere in the center. You'll see that's what I'll do for most of the workshop. I'll have this here. And then you actually have another window you have to deal with, and that's your Zoom window. So if you're trying to look to see what I'm doing and then copy that, I might recommend putting the Zoom window on the left side of your screen, covering up your directions, at least partially covering up your directions. That way you can easily toggle back and forth between your Zoom, say, and your main window that you'll be working in. Speaking of getting the Zoom window out of the way, I need to tuck it off somewhere where it's not in my way as well. There we go. I'm going to hide it off to the side. So if there's any comments in the chat, Maggie or Shane or Andy or Ben can relay those to me, because I'm going to have my chat hidden off to the side. All right, good. So let's, I want to just cover, again, this is show and tell. I'm not going to go into this deeply whatsoever, because we've already done an ArcGIS Online workshop earlier this fall that hopefully some of you caught. If not, this will just be for those of you who have, it's going to be kind of a little bit of a review. For the others of you, this is just kind of a slight orientation to the kind of the main hub access point for data within the Esri Online environment. If you haven't done so far, though, I would recommend going and logging into ArcGIS Online right now. So to do that, I'm already logged in, but for you, you might just look for ArcGIS Online login. Obviously, it pops up for me, and then you'd go to your sign in and type in your credentials that Shane probably helped set you up with, or that you might have already had from previous workshops. And then once you do that, this is where you'll end up at. Or you'll either come up to your home tab or your organizational tab is usually the two defaults that people come into. Again, just show and tell. When you come in, the home tab is not really important. We don't really use that, so I'm going to skip over that. The gallery tab, though, is useful in a lot of cases, because it has a whole bunch of layers that scenes, maps, you name it, all of your content that's been shared within your organization can be found in your gallery. If you're not a part of ANR, your gallery might be anywhere from empty to having a whole assortment of other things in it. But this is useful for just perusing different types of maps that you can pick from, or layers that might be interesting. And so this is all available here for kind of exploring data. That's useful for putting in reference layers within your field maps, web maps, web mapping applications. Even your mobile app can have this data displayed as a background for reference. Moving on, I'm going to go to map. But one thing before I do that, you'll notice that there's a conditional ribbon across the top, or actually just a standard ribbon across the top that has gallery that shows that your information. There's map, scene, notebook. I'm not going to cover all of these, your organization. When I click on map, that horizontal ribbon is going to disappear. And instead, it's going to be in a drop down on the top left-hand corner. This is what Maggie was referring to as the traditional map viewer. So this is the way that I learned to use ArcGIS Online. Many of you might have also, because I see that you have a number of you have experience. This is, and I still refer back to this in a pinch. In fact, this is the last map that I was playing with today, was one that we'll be using to this during this workshop, because I just wanted to manipulate a couple quick layers without having to bring it into Map Viewer. So I just open it here really quick to change a couple features. Anyhow, this map, this traditional map viewing environment is what we covered in our ArcGIS Online workshop, because it also includes a lot of analytical functions that are not available in the map viewer yet. The reason why the map viewer is really nice is because it's very efficient for designing your maps. And that's the key element there. Is this has, if I click on one of these, sometimes there is, where is it? Perform analysis. You don't have those options so much in the map viewer, and I'm just waiting for them to come to kind of get carried over there. But there's so this has everything in it. It's just quicker and more elegant in the other environment for creating your maps. So there's some things that you see. This is just your contents that I have already in this map. I'm glad that I already have something up, because if I didn't, it wouldn't be there wouldn't be not much to look at. But you can see that there's like tabular information that you can see that might have been created for each of the features. I have line, polygon, tree, and then points. The native trees of California is what we'll be doing a little bit of kind of collective or collaborative data entry today for the fun of it. Moving on though, because this is not the environment we're going to be working with, there's also, just know the terminology of base maps. This is where you can select what kind of background you want for your maps. Again, there's analysis we won't be working with today. And then there's some other things that are carry over to all kinds of different functions within the Esri constellation. Is save and share, and publish is another term for share sometimes. So moving on from that, I'm not going to cover this because it's already been done in the ArcGIS Online workshop and not necessarily super germane to everything we're doing today. So I'm going to skip scene. I'm going to skip notebook. Maggie mentioned earlier that kind of the push into the future is to be able to do more GIS in the cloud. Notebook already is starting to allow you to bring in Python scripts to be able to do more deeper analysis in the online environment in ways that you could never do before. Groups. Now, this is something that was mentioned before and is really important when it comes to field maps. And the reason for that is because one of the things with a field map is that you say you have an organization. I don't even know how many employees UCANR has right now. It's quite a lot, over 1,000 for sure. So we have a number of ANR affiliates. Well, with that many people, you're not going to want to create. You want to subset people that have access to certain types of data. For example, if you're going to do a tree inventory, you might want to have a core team of people that are trained and know how to identify certain types of trees And so you'd limit the access to edit tree data to just that kind of core team of people. This is where you can do that by creating a group and then inviting the members to that group. So once you create a group, and it doesn't have the invitations quite here yet, you give it all the information you might want. And then it would look like one of these that's over on the side. Let me see one that's that might be interesting. Okay, field maps training November 2022. So I already I created a group for the fun of it. So once you're in here, you can invite users in that group to join you. And so we have all these training, but I could also use, I could search for people, search for users in the organization, like Robert Johnson is unfortunately out sick today, but yeah, I could add him to the group. And then anything that we work on, then any of the group can have access to. It's kind of slick. And then later on, once you've curated or collected your data in the field, then you can change the settings for sharing that we'll dive into in a little bit. So you can share it to your whole organization, or when it comes to project, like making it public facing, you can share it so everyone can see it in the web maps. So the groups section is important to understand, or just to know that it's there. So again, just creating group, you can see then the groups that show up, and then you can, once you go inside a group, then you can do editing of that group as long as you are the manager of the group. All right, moving on more. Content. This is the next most important thing that we have here is, and this is really where we're going to start off our hands-on stuff in a moment. We don't have to do hands-on stuff yet, but it's just so you know, this is where we'll kind of launch off with getting our hands dirty with all the stuff that we'll do today. And in your content tab at the top, you'll see, in my case, I have, I don't know, tons and tons of different types of features, web experiences, web maps, story maps. If I go far enough, there's a shape file that I uploaded there. Instant app, I don't even remember what that is. That's some kind of peripheral something, I don't know, from HOL training. Yeah, and so I have all these different I'm trying to think of what the right word is for them. They're services in a way. Some of them are not services in that they can be accessed, and they have rules that are tied to them for how they can be used. And some things like feature layers that are hosted, those are like points, lines, or polygons that once I publish them, then can be used or accessed by people depending on what the settings for those features might be that we will be diving into during the workshop. And I can show you just really quick what that might look like. If I go into, say, the tree polygon, what the functionality of this, the quote unquote services are, you set that up here with the settings to show that this can be enabled for editing, for example, that is enabled for sync for like offline use and like collector or field maps kind of use. And we can see what you can see, these other service capabilities that are included here. You can also, if I back up again, in some cases, I would try to find a tree line. I want to see, not that here's one. There's I have to put some different like T's and so forth on mine because I recreate the same layers all the time. So if I have one with multiple points in there, sometimes I have to be able to enable attachments to be able to just put like a picture that's associated with a point layer. So this is where I can kind of tweak the accessibility and some of the characteristics of how you can use this type of feature in whatever environment you're using it in, whether it's your mobile app or your web maps. Good. I'm gonna go back to my content just because there's a couple other really quick things that we'll do, and then we'll take a break. One is your file folders. This is where your this is how you organize your content, because I have hundreds of these map features over here, or web tiles, or layer, you name it. All of these different types of web elements that are included over here, your map elements and map features. The on this side, I've organized them into a whole bunch of different file folders. What we're looking at is all of my content over here, but I have a field maps training set that is much shorter. So I can just work with these, and then I don't have to go searching for stuff that's from March 16, 2021, way back in my list. It's already here. If I needed to be able to get to these really easily and frequently, I can also star them, and that creates a favorite. And then if I was back in my all content, I just could go to my favorites up here, and it would show all of my favorites that I've marked over years past. Good, back to my content. All right, with that, that's the overview of ArcGIS Online. Let's take a 10-minute break, or 9-minute break-ish, come back at 10 after the hour, so 2:10, and then we will get rolling here. Sound good? Any questions? I know that I kind of fire hose you with a whole bunch of just kind of overarching information, but once you start getting your hands into this, it's going to be, it'll become much more clear, I think. Good. If there's no questions, I am going to mute and step away for a minute. All right, let's get going again here. All right, so for those of you that I know that several of you are already experienced with field maps, and probably some and probably a lot of the stuff that we're already covering here. But for those of you that are not, don't worry, I'm not going to just speed through things like I was speed talking through all the some of the elements of ArcGIS Online there. When it comes to actually going into hands-on stuff here, I'll make sure that I slow it down. And also, if you have any questions or issues, or you get hung up on something, don't hesitate to ask, because I don't want to leave anyone behind if I can help it. And we can always set up a breakout group for you to help you out. Additionally, for those of you that are more advanced, and for whom are looking to maybe get answers to things that have been troubling you with working with field maps, we have office hours on Mondays and Tuesdays that you might be interested in for more complex questions that might not be we might not be able to cover here in the workshop at kind of like the introductory level. So just so you know, if you go to the UCANR-IGIS website, you should be able to find training, and also which you've probably already done to get yourself here, but also there's the office hours options that are on our website that you can look at. And you can sign up, and again, Mondays and Tuesday afternoons are available for that. Good. Without further ado, there's one more thing that I want to cover before we start creating our feature layers and moving into the full workflow. And that is at the top right-hand corner of your ArcGIS Online environment. So hopefully you have this up still. You'll see this little cluster of dots. And on that, I'm going to click. And what you'll see is this constellation of Esri applications that are tied to ArcGIS Online, usually in some way or another. You can grab these and rearrange them if you'd like. So when I say go to click on the shortcut, this is the shortcut I'm referring to, the shortcut button, and you might have to search for, say, Experience Builder, if you need Experience Builder for today, or the Field Maps web application. You can find it right here. We're not working with story maps today, so I'm going to move that down a little bit. So the key apps that we'll be using are right across the top. So that's this is a handy shortcut. I love using this. I use it all the time. Okay, Now, let me click back on my web map or my ArcGIS Online environment. So hopefully everybody's here in this setting. I'm going to make sure everybody gets a chance. Make sure you're in ArcGIS Online and on your content pane at the top. And from here, again, first steps of actually getting hands-on, we're going to go over to New Item and click here. This has changed in the last 6 months or so. So if you've done this a bunch, you might recognize the changes. If not, this will be all new to you. There's a bunch of different things you can create here. There's tile layers, locator, scene layers, you name it, URLs. I think that, I don't know how many times, like 19 out of 20, 30, 29 out of 30 times, I always end up picking the feature layer. The only other thing would be an application usually in my case, but the feature layers, this is where you create a new feature, just an empty feature. And so click on that. I'll go back. We just, so those of you that are just getting caught up here, create new item, click feature layer, and then you're going to define your own layer. So it's just it's checked there for default, and we go down and click next. And for today's exercise, what we'll be doing is creating just for a theme, just a random theme, because there's trees all over California, and that's where most of us are at. We're going to be collecting tree information. So I'm going to type in here, tree point. And sometimes what you'll see me have to do is put a 1 or a 2 or some kind of other designation after it, because I've already created so many of the same kind of layers before, and that you can't have the same names in your collection. You won't have that problem. So you put in tree layer or tree point, and then it'll be a point layer. Then we can click add. Let's do tree line and change this over to on the right to line layer. Add one more. Click tree or type in tree polygon. And we select polygon layer from the drop down. Good. So we'll pick 3 different ones. One from there, you can sometimes you might, and this is a really specific situations where you might want to enable add GPS metadata fields. This is mostly important when you're using some kind of peripheral GPS unit, like a Bad Elf. Garmin has a number of peripheral GPSs now as well, or something like that, where you want to have information about accuracy or other diagnostics of your GPS unit. But I say that's in very specific situations. Usually you don't need that, but what you do often want to have is your Z values. So Z values are like, so if you have your coordinate system where X is left, right, or east, west, and your Y is north, south, then Z values your elevation. So I want to turn that on usually. So for your point layer, you might want to have your elevational data collected with your points. And so toggle that on. The other one will make your tables really complex, your output tables. So you don't really need that turned on. And then we'll click next. So for those of you catching up, tree point, point layer, tree line, line layer, tree polygon, polygon layer up above, and then next. Add a title. This is where I'm going to have to change the name of it. If I look on here, let's see, creating in the directions, it says create a table like field maps training would be the name, just for something kind of intuitive. But I've done this so many times, I can't do that. I have to do, I don't know, put a 5 after it or something like that, maybe a 6. Because I've done the same kind of file a whole bunch of times, and I need to clean out my junk in my contents. And I'll show you how I can search for that, which I need to get around to one of these days. And that is I need to add a tag, and I'm going to put in junk. That way it's easily discoverable by me, where I can search my contents for just junk, and then everything that's junk that I can then jettison can be deleted kind of in one foul swoop. And I keep saying I need to get to that, and I forget after the workshops. So between now and the next workshop, I should probably like clean out all the trash files that I have that have accumulated that are kind of redundant. You can select your folder. In my case, I'm going to just leave it where it's at, and I'll just clean it out because it's junk. But I could, if I wanted to, put it in my field maps training folder. Those of you that haven't created a file folder yet, or kind of like reorganize your data, don't worry. You don't have to worry about that. You can always relocate it later or reorganize it later if you want as well. The main thing, though, is that you have the title, and you have to have some kind of tag. So you might say field maps, for example, for your workshop. Or you might say workshop. Just so those are key terms that you can search for if you want to look for your data, or if you open it up to your whole organization or even to everyone online, they can use those keywords will be make it more discoverable. From there, I'm going to click next. And this is just going to take a second. So this is creating a feature layer with 3 features in it. So you have the point, line, and polygon all in one file, essentially. You can create those files separately as well. Just create one and then create a new one, The value of that is sometimes you'll want to include your point layer on some of your web maps later on, and you don't want to include your lines or your polygons. And so you can kind of spread, or you might want to use a polygon on one map and then a point on another map. So you might want to create those separately. But for now, having them all point, line, and polygon all in one layer is just more efficient for today. It takes less time. Good. So once it's finished processing, this is what it looks like. Let's see, I'm going to take a pause for a second and make sure that everyone's doing good. Let me look at the chat. Is there anyone? Uh-oh, what's going on here? Beatrice is having a little bit of trouble. Beatrice, did you get that worked out at all yet?
It's just that that's our, just give it a new name, put your initials at the end.
Okay, got it. Okay. Good. Just double checking. I just want to make sure that I'm not leaving anybody behind right here, because I noticed in the past workshop, this was a point where some people okay, so it wouldn't let you, okay, so Rich, it wouldn't let you use the name, had to start over. Okay, so it wouldn't let you use the name that I created. So I'm going to just go through the steps. I won't hit the final go again. This is really important because this is, again, watching last time's workshop. This is what hung up people, and then they were behind for the rest of the workshop. And so I just want to make sure we get this covered. So I'm going to go back to my content. For those of you that that are looking at this page, and it's fine, go ahead and you can just watch what I'm doing. You don't have to go back and do what I'm doing again. But for those of you that had a little bit of trouble, I'm going to go through the steps just quickly again. I'm going to go to content. You notice that in my case, you see the field maps training 6 is right there at the top. But for those of you it didn't work, in content, you're going to go create new item. Go down to feature layer, first option. Define your own layer. Just click next as a default. And this one, say tree point layer, just leave it as the default, and then add tree line, switch it to a line layer, add one more, tree polygon. I'll say tree poly for now and change this to tree to polygon layer. Then I would toggle on enable the Z value. I'll click next. This is probably where you had the trouble. You can put in this name if you'd like. I just copy and paste it. But if it wouldn't accept that name because there's another file with the same name, maybe put your initials after it. You have to have a tag or it won't let you create it. Just a note, if you type something in it, it doesn't recognize it because it recognizes my last entries. And so I can just click on them. But what you need to do is click enter to create that new tag if it's a fresh new one that's never been used before. And then once this is done, you'd click next and it's going to run for a second. And hopefully that worked for you, Rich. Take a sip. Good. All right, good. So hopefully if that didn't work for anyone, throw it in the chat and we can circle back to that in shortly when we'll take the next break fairly soon. Good. So now we have all of this information here. What we need to do really quick, and this is a new thing this is since the last time I created a field map this summer, something's changed, and that change is that now things are not or your layers are not automatically set up to collect to have attachments connected to them within your web apps or your mobile app. And to do that, I want you to click on the tree point and then down on the right hand side, click enable attachments. Good. So that's the first step that you'll do. Good. Now what we'll do is we'll do the back button at the top, like see where you see field maps training SH, whether your field maps training option at the top, click on the back on that. And then we'll go to settings. This is fairly important as well. Under settings, so again, so on your field maps training file that you just created, go to settings. We're going to scroll down and click on enable sync. Good. And I don't believe there's anything else that is important right here. Sync is the most important. And then we click save. Takes a second for that to work. Syncing is important because if you don't have sync set up, it's not going to work with your collection apps the way that you want it to, because you want to have your points updated with the syncing. When you click on your mobile app, you want that mobile app to sync it to the web apps. Good. Now scroll back up to the top. See where I mentioned earlier, it's really important to have that roller on your mouse. Trying to scroll up and down with two fingers on your pad. I know some people are masterful at that, but having a roller, I just do it without thinking about it now. So now we're in settings. One other things, we'll go over to overview. Again, last one, and go down to share. I just want to, you don't have to change this right now. This is fine where it's at, but this is where it's just shared with yourself for now. This is where you could designate your entire organization for it to be shared to, or to the public at large. So if you want it to set up so anyone that searches it with ArcGIS Online as the source, with the if you're say a web map, Maggie kind of touched on that earlier, but there's all these layers that are aligned that are kind of they're easily at your fingertips. Some of those have been organized and kind of curated into a more clean library by places like Living Atlas. But if you wanted to share it to everyone everywhere, you could click everyone. You could also edit groups and just share it with a designated group. We don't need to do that right now because it's just for training, but it's important that you know that that's there. Good. All right, with the tree line and polygon features, I'm not going to worry about those right now. And I think that, yes. Double checking. Yes, now that I have this, I don't want to move ahead. I reordered some of the steps in this for efficiency's sake. Now that we have the layers in here, we need to set up what's called, set up your questions, essentially. So what we'll do first is on this page, so hopefully you're on your field maps training. For any reason, if you got off of it, you can go to your content. If you're clicking around and you got off of it, go to your field, your training, your content, all my content, and it'll be the last thing that you worked on. So I'll click on that and it'll come back up. Then I want you to click on the tree point again. Good. And we'll go over to the top right-hand corner. So you'll see up on the top right, there'll be data. Just real quick, speak up, anyone. If I'm going too quick here, just let me know. And I go over, I'll circle back and kind of cover things a couple times sometimes, but I want to make sure that I'm not getting ahead of everyone. Good. Yeah, just let me know. So once we go in here, you won't see anything. There's nothing in this is in the table that we're looking at right here, but there's nothing that's been collected so far or created. So we want to go to the fields. This is your form that's associated with this point layer specifically. And in your fields, these are the things that are available right now. Photos and files, because we enabled attachments that was created. But we don't have anything else that we're going to collect. And if we looked in the directions, what we do want is tree type, and you could have other characteristics that you might want to include there as well. And I'll get to that. So what we'll do is we'll create a new domain display name and field. So what we'll do is click on the add. The first one, okay, you'll see this a lot of the times with I would say old school, like there's even new school GIS people, they'll still do it a lot of the time. But GIS nerds like myself, you'll see us type with underscores a lot of the time. So what I'm going to put in here is tree underscore type, because in a lot of points within the GIS, you can't have spaces. And this is one of those. You can't have a field name with a space. The display name, on the other hand, can have spaces. So think of the display name as what the question is. So what type of tree is this? You could frame this as a question, but for now, I'm just going to say tree type without a space, just to keep it simple. But this is the question that you'll be asking. String refers to a text file, but you can also, sometimes you can have dates, integers, numbers, you name it. But string is a text. But we don't really need to have 256 characters of length for our text. 50 is going to be more than enough, so we'll just do that just to kind of simplify our table afterwards in the end. And then as far as default value, we don't need to enter anything in here. You typically don't with a string, and we can leave the null values as checked for now. So that means you just don't have to add anything in there if you don't want to. If you just want to drop a point, just as like, and then add a comment, which we can add that as another field later on. But anyway, so once we've done tree type without an underscore, string 50, we can add this new field. Good. So we see that we have the have that now showed up. This now is going to be a question that could be answered. There won't be, by default, it won't have the object ID and the global ID included as questions, and the photos and files that'll just automatically pop up as an option on your field maps. But tree type is just going to be like too cumbersome, and there's this just too wide open. We want to maybe make it a more easy user experience. So what we can do here is we can click on tree type, and we can create a list of options that we want to select from. And for you, we're not going to get into too deep of a list, but let's just create a short list at least of different tree types. So I'm going to go over to the right side and create list. So I'm going to back up a spot there just so any of you that just missed that, I know between things, I'm going to back up just a little bit. I'm going to be going to my tree, going to my data, fields. And once I'm here to my tree type, I'm going to click on tree type and create a list. Good. So in this case, the code is the one that can't have any underscores, and the label can have underscores. And because I've done this, well, today, it's going to automatically give me the most recent things that I've used. So I'm going to click in there and just put alder. And you can type in something in like pine, oak, whatever you know that's in your neighborhood, and then add that in there. Next, let's go add display name. I'm going to say pine. I'm going to give each of you all a chance to do this. So I'll give you a little bit of time. Just add some different tree types that you know of that you might find around your house or wherever you're located at right now. Give you a moment to add some of these in there. So we're just creating a short list. With our collaborative tree point layer that we'll be playing with here when we walk outside in about a half hour and wander around, there's going to be a lot more options on that you can look at. Lastly, once you've added in a few of these, you don't have to add in that many, honestly. Just a couple are fine. This is just going to be a learning experience. The last thing is you can't have any spaces on the code I mentioned before. So other type of tree, or I'll just put other is fine. So tree type code other. Good. And then, oops, I have the zoom in the way. And then at the bottom left, I have generate list, and I click on that. Oh, what the heck? It's just not accepting it. Oh, what the heck? There are no values in this field to generate. Am I covering up something else? Oh, I have to delete this one. Oh, now, oh, sorry, I have to just save. My Zoom window was in the way. All right, then click save. I'm sorry. So once you've got your list down on the right-hand corner, click save. And then you will see your list of domain values here on the bottom of your table. In a little bit, we are going to create what's called a cascading and select option of for designating new questions that will pop up only if you say you selected other type of tree, and then you can have another box that would open up in your Field Maps mobile app that will have a question. That way you don't have it just isn't always there for a question. It's only if you selected that one option, and we'll get to that when we work with the Field Maps online application. So you have to,
real
yes.
quick, can you review where you enabled attachments?
Oh, yes, I'll do that. Actually, I need to do that right now anyways. I got to back up because there's a weird thing that's new with this that's kind of slightly a hassle. And that is that I need to back up to and this is for all of you, click on your Field Maps training up at the top blue ribbon. and it'll back you up here. And then click on your tree point. And then down on the right-hand corner is where you see the enable attachments. It was actually good timing for that question, because we were just going to have to pass right by this in a second right now anyways. Because now we're going to go back to data, go back to fields, and we're going to add another field. And this field will say other underscore tree. And then we don't have to we have spaces in this one, other type of tree. See what I did there? So other field, and this is going to be a little bit more clear when we develop the when we actually publish this and use it in our mobile app. Leave it as string, give this a 50 as well. And then click add new field. So you see that show up underneath the tree type and then other type of tree. And just for the fun of it, let's do this one more time where we're going to click add and just say comments. You'll have to repeat that. And you can leave it full length. It's going to be the last question. It won't like, it's okay to have a large box at the end if it's on there. And then click add new field. Good. So now we can select from a list of trees. We'll have where we can type in our own type of tree if it isn't on the list. And then we have a comments option, so which will all be questions that'll pop up on the points. I'm not going to go through any of that with the lines or the polygon. I just put those in there just because there's a couple functions in the field maps that are kind of fun to play with, that like streaming your lines behind you and that kind of thing. But so we're not going to worry about the questions with the points or lines in the polygon. But for now, this is what this is the same processes that you would use with those as well. Good. So now our feature layer is all set up for the next step of the exercise. But before we do that, since we've been going for about a half hour or so, I want to take a quick 5-minute break, and then we're going to jump into using the map viewer, the new one, the one formerly known as beta. But we'll jump into that. This is really quick. And set up your map really quick, do a couple little tweaks, and then we will go outside and collect some data. So now it's time to transition into the map viewer, the new one. And the way you do that is up here at the top right corner where there's the shortcut button, the cluster of dots. Assuming your ArcGIS Online has the horizontal tab still, and you're all set up here. Just let me know if anyone's not ready. I guess if you're not ready, you might not be here. You wouldn't say anything, but there's so this is key. You're gonna go up to the top, click on this shortcut cluster, and go to map viewer. Click on that. Good. So when it first comes up, what you're going to be looking at is just general options along the left-hand side, including where you can save your map, the layers that you might add. If you're going to add an actual whole map in here, you could use this from your browsing from your collection or ArcGIS Online, you name it. Layers is usually what you'll be working with. And then you'll see this then more specific set of options that are right after it, the second pane. Usually these are referred to as panes, or in this case, it's kind of a vertical ribbon with a pane that pops up. There's tables, base maps that are good. And then again, your saving and opening options, map properties. Kind of similar to what you see in the traditional map viewer on ArcGIS Online, but everything's along the left side instead of kind of clustered across the top. First thing that we're going to want to do is add in our layers. So from the layer tab, go down to add and click on that. And the most recent layer that you worked on should be the first thing that pops up, making life easier for us. So you don't, otherwise you'd have to search for it. But for now, we'll just go and click on the most recent one. And this is the one I just created and was working with. So I can click on that and it'll give you a little bit of information down below and acknowledgements, that sort of thing. And then I can click add to map. And it will pop up. And then what you see is a conditional ribbon that comes up on the right-hand side of the screen with a number of options there. You can also change some things like your view. So I'm going to kind of center this on California because I know that's the area that I'm going to be working on. And when we save this, that will be, even though you can kind of tweak things now a little bit, and both in the field maps, online app, as well as the experience builder, it's nice to get it all set up right here, right now. You can see the symbology, sometimes otherwise called style, of the features that are on the far right-hand side. And to be able to see where those are conditionally shown from, what we'll do is on this pane right here on the left under add layer, X out of that, and then do the back arrow, and then click on this and it'll drop down. There you go. Sorry, pick on the arrow to get it to drop down. Now, where I mentioned this far right-hand pane that disappeared just now is how that's conditional. If I click on the tree point, I will now get symbol options for points. If I click on the line, it's just going to be the line. And same with the polygon. We're just going to focus on the point features right now. So click on the tree point, and you'll see over on the right side, there's the symbology. Again, sometimes it'll say style, sometimes it'll say symbology, depending on where you're at and which app. It's the same difference, but you can edit this style. And the way you do that, edit layer style, click that. Just a warning though, don't save any of your style changes right away yet, because there's something I got to mention about that. And then once you click that, go down the style options. Come on. There we go. And I click on the dot. So it just takes a couple more clicks. Once this is in, I can click on this drop down, and then you'll see a whole variety of different shape options. So there's the basic shape. I honestly kind of like this little kind of, I don't know, little dot. It works well. It looks good. In most cases, it's kind of, it doesn't blend into too many things, but sometimes you can change to basic shapes. One of these work, but I gotta, I just said a second ago, don't, for now, we don't need to change our shape. I just want to show you that there are options here. This carries over to your mobile app, your Field Maps mobile app. And the problem is if you select some of them, like Firefly, it breaks, it can break. At least it broke it the last time I used it. Your features won't show up. It just won't work. So if you choose the wrong symbology or the wrong style, then it just doesn't work later on. The pins they worked when I used them. The basic shapes worked, but Firefly didn't, and Government didn't in one of the ones I used. So just so you know, these feature points are what will show up on your map app. So if you're on there and you click and it comes down and it creates like an airplane. This particularly is an issue if you try to use on some of the lines and polygons as well. But for now, I'm just going to X out of that. I just want to show you that that's so you can change your style of your symbols there. But what we can do right now that is a good idea is to change the size of your symbol. Make it like a 30 or 40 or so. I'm going to make it 30 because then it'll show up much more clearly on your app. And you can change this is for your mobile app more, and you can also change the symbology later on in your online maps to make them more just more appealing, and to have better contrast with what's in the background. So once we've changed it to 30, that will stay. I want to go over to the right and look at some of these other options here. There's the properties option that shows some more information. That's the first thing that was defaulted up when it came up. So there's a pyramid, appearance, visible range. This, if you don't want your features to show up on your map at certain zoom levels, this is where you would do it. You'd zoom in or out in it, but having it a full zoom range is a good idea to stay with the default. This is more of an issue when you're doing kind of more higher level computer cartography type tweaks to your web maps, as well as when you bring in web features from online. Sometimes their visible ranges are already limited and you have to reset this. Just as kind of something that you might need to know later on. All right, there's editing. You can edit some of these, so we can edit the features. That's actually, there's a better spot to do that over here on the right. So moving down, there's styles. We already looked at styles. There's going to be filter. That's not going to be pertinent yet because we don't have anything to really filter with. Effects, don't worry about that. Pop-ups, fields. Pop-ups is something that we do want to work with. So what we'll do here is I'm going to click the pop-up option, and it's going to give me a variety of different options here. We can do this drop down to look to see what it says. Tree point is fine. This is where you might come back to adjust more complex surveys later on, to say what your how you want your list to look, the titles, the descriptions, when you click on a dot that's on your map. That will make more sense once we create a web map. And so you'd come back to this point and look at it. But what we can do right now, which is neat, is come up with adding content. And what we can do is create a text that goes along with those features. And this is kind of a nifty way of having a reference into your map. And what I might say is, so I'll back up there. Oops, I got my zoom in the way again, as always. Okay, I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to go down. I would have clicked add content and I'd create text. And then I'm going to add text to this, and I'm going to say, for more information, click here. So I'll put something like that in. And then what I can do is enter a hyperlink. So that click here can direct someone to a reference that might be relevant to the data they're collecting. And in this case, I already looked online. This is the CalScape website. This is pretty decent for tree identification. So I will copy the URL for that. For those of you that want a second, you can do this on your own if you feel like it. Go to, I just searched California trees, or you can say CalScape, California trees, just Google that. And then once you get to, well, it doesn't matter what site you go to, but I'm going to just copy the URL and then go back to, which one was it I was on? Here we go, my untitled map. And then I'm going to highlight over the top of it. So if anyone is kind of having a hard time keeping up with this, don't worry. This is not really critical. This is just a fun little thing to do to make your web maps a little bit more nifty and just kind of explore some of the options. But for more information, click here. I'm going to go up to the hyperlink that's on the top right-hand side. Click that and then paste that URL in there. And very importantly, I have to click the green arrow. If I just say okay, it won't save it. But if I click the green arrow, then that's saved. And then I click OK. So any of you that didn't catch that, I added the content. I went to text. I created the text, typed in this. I did the hyperlink. highlighting the click here and then check green check mark, and then I okayed it. Good. So that now will show up as an additional option or a little additional pop-up when you click on the points that you put on there. You could put on, and here's I don't know if they fixed this, and I didn't want to go through the exercise all over again if it broke this. Previously, this is important. If I go down further, there's labels, forms, edit. I mentioned there's other ways to do the edit. So when we get here, if I wanted to edit, I can click on one of these. I can place a feature by going out. I'm not going to place a feature. Don't do that right now. Don't click on the map. Here's the reason why, is that if you add a feature in, and this is where I said I don't want to really have to go back and redo this if it didn't work, is that in the past, if you add a feature here before you add a feature in your field maps app, then you can't add features in your field map. It has to start off in your field map, but then you can go back and you can edit and you can place features after one has been placed in your field map, but you don't do that yet. But if you added once a feature is added, that feature will have all that, have that pop-up information for the tree guide. Does that make sense? Hopefully. So I know it doesn't make sense to me why you can't add one now and have it break the mobile app or the mobile app, but that's just the way it has been in the past. Okay. But this is where you can edit and tweak your existing features later on. That's important though, because sometimes you'll put features out there and you'll want to delete features, that kind of thing. That's doing that in your mobile app is not the way to do it. You come back to the computer and you delete stuff, or you edit it is the better way usually. Okay. Even though you can do some rudimentary editing while you're there on your mobile app. All right, so that is really the gist of this. One more important thing that I wanted, actually two important things that we do very much need to do. One is save. That's the very most important thing. The other thing that is important, in my opinion, is using a base map, changing your base map. The thing is that you can imagine this kind of semi-topographic sort of reference base map. It looks okay for some things, but when you're in the field and you're collecting data, it is not useful when you zoom in. And so we want to change to a base map that is more useful here. It's by clicking base map on the far left and then clicking hybrid imagery. Good. Then we can kind of adjust that if we wanted the positioning of it. And once we have that positioned, we will go down to save and open. So save often. And that's luckily this is just a couple steps we've taken, and we'll click save as. Give it a title. I'm going to say something that's memorable. I forget what the directions say, but November. You can have spaces here, by the way, on this one, field map. This is map, field maps map. There we go. I could put 2022 too, but I'm going to put in tags of junk because I'm going to undoubtedly do this a bunch more times in the future. And then I'm just going to leave it in my default location folder and then click save. Good. So now we have a map. It doesn't have anything on it because we haven't added features through our mobile app, which we'll get to in just a moment. Good. So we are part of the way there. This is important, this step, to have not so much just now, but we will come back to this later to edit and tweak things in the background of our web mapping application and experience builder. Good. Now let's go up to the top right-hand corner and click on that shortcut cluster of dots again. Let me double check, make sure there's no questions though. Someone probably give me a shout out if you see questions. No, nothing new on the chat. Okay, good. All right, yeah. If you do have questions though, that's good too. All right, so we're going to go up to this shortcut cluster, and now we're going to go to field maps and click on that. you might have to search for it in your options. This, by the way, is one of the reasons why we have you get an ArcGIS online account through IGIS, is because some organizational accounts don't have all these apps included. And what you should see is the most recent map that you created. It automatically recognizes that as the first option. And so that is what I'm going to click on and bring up. Most recent one that we created. Now, Beatrice earlier asked about how we do the cascading select, and that's right. That's one of the first things that we'll be doing here. Before we do that, though, I just want to point out a couple little things, and it's not really important because we don't have to change anything right now, but the sharing settings are also included here. So you can set your sharing level. It's not necessary right now, but you can select if you want to be in your organization, just like you did in the earlier levels or the other levels. But yeah, you can set your sharing here. You can do set up offline access, which is good. And we want to toggle that on. If you're going to be out somewhere where you don't have cell phone reception or data service connection, this is good because you can download your data beforehand. Just click that on for now, and we won't use it, but just so you can refer to it in your mobile app. So these are the settings for your mobile app. This is the online kind of setting environment that then will carry over to the Field Maps mobile app. Georeferences, don't worry about that. But what we will go to is the forms. This is recently changed. And so it's, so if you're reading through the directions and trying to follow this, it's going to be much easier for you to watch what I do here and do it than to just try to read and go, okay, where do I click next? In this case, we're going to go from forms to the field map training option and the drop down specifically to see the tree points, the tree line, and the tree polygon. The questions and the answers that we're going to be looking for are all related to the tree point. So that's what we're going to click on there. And you'll see a whole list of information come up on the form builder to the right. Let's shift this over so I get a good view of my whole screen. Good. So it has all these various options that are included in here that are neat, but most importantly, we want to scroll down to the bottom and we will double click on the tree type. So for those of you that might have got lost on any of that, toggle in between screens and so forth. So in the Field Maps app, we go to Forms. Then we go down, expand the Field Maps training file that we created, and the tree point feature, click on that. You'll see the form builder appear. Scroll down to the bottom, near the bottom, and you'll see tree type. And I'm going to double click on that. And it'll add that to the center of the form. This form in the center these are the list of questions that are going to show up in my mobile app in the order that they're laid in here. After you double click the first one, then the next one you would just drag in there. So we have, this is the type of tree that was with this, remember the list of domain fields, the alder, the pine, the oak, that kind of thing. That's all in here. So there's no value. That's what we have. Oops, I clicked on that. So now I have to go back to unclick on it again to go back to where I was at. Now I'm just going to grab the other type of tree, drag and drop it underneath the first one. So you see what I did there? Down on the bottom right, I clicked and dragged over. And then finally, I'm going to click and drag the comments underneath of that. Good. So now I have tree type, other type of tree, and comments. So Beatrice, thinking ahead, thinking kind of, I don't know, great minds think alike. Well, we thought that was an important part of the workshop as well. And so that is what we will do now, is to set this other type of tree up question to only appear if we need to see it. I mean, if we've selected pine up here, we don't need to have this question included. And so what I'll do is I'll click on this and you'll see the properties appear on the right-hand side. So the display name is other type of tree. You see that at the top. You can change that there. But if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, what we have is conditional visibility is what we can use. They've also added conditional expressions, and they've simplified this, and I like the way they've simplified it. Before we look at conditional visibility, I'm going to do the drop down, and this is info only. If you look at this, this is where you can add expressions that are related to like calculations or other things that might be involved, but I'm not going to do that now. We're just working with strings. Like say if you wanted to calculate, like say, I'm trying to think of an example. There's if you said this tree was ranked like 10 out of 10 in health, but 5 out of 10 in water availability, then you can create like an expression that calculates another point or layer that automatically that would be something of interest, like some kind of an indice to look at the threat to the tree or something like that. So this is where you can calculate expressions, but more commonly used, much more commonly used, would be your conditional visibility. And I love how they've made this much easier. So under conditional visibility, click on that very far right-hand bottom. Make sure the other type of tree is the one that's highlighted in the center first. If it's not highlighted, see if I click on it, it'll go back to the form builder. If I click on it again, the properties will show up and I have to scroll down to the bottom. Conditional visibility, add expression. So it already recognizes that there's a list before it. And so that by default, it'll show up. It's the only really thing. I mean, there's the comments, but really that's the tree type is what's important. And then conditional visibility is tree type is, and I will select other type of tree. So if someone answers other type of tree, this question will show up now after I click save. So I go down to the bottom right-hand corner. So again, tree type is other type of tree, click save. And so you'll see this little jagged line show up here. That's just showing that this question will only appear when that's selected above. Good. Makes it pretty easy, I think. Much easier than the old way of actually having to put in kind of like a little mini script of how to do it right. So yeah, it's that easy. Good. Everything else we've already set everything else up. So I am going to do one of the most important things that I always forget. Well, I don't always forget it because I've forgot it so many times. Now I remember I have to, is you go up to the top right-hand corner. There's like a little disk there for those of people that are really old that save stuff on disks, and click that. And it saved these settings to your file. And now we are ready to use this in the actual mobile app. So what I'm going to do, and we're going to just really quick, I'm going to go and bring up my phone. I'm going to stop sharing. Is there any questions while I stop sharing and I transition over to my my phone and share the screen from there? Share screen. Good. Start now. There we go. It's there. For a second, it showed the zoom.
That looks good.
Good. All right, we're up. Now I see it. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'll have to tell you what I'm doing really is I'm going to go into my field maps. And this is what everyone should hopefully do right now is go into field maps. So I have it already set up on my phone. It's really similar between an Android and an iPhone. So I'm just going to click on that and it'll come up. And for most of you, you will not see a lot of different map options, hopefully. In my case, I have a ton on there that I've worked on over time. So you'll see a whole bunch of these. It's particularly the collaborative field maps practice app. This is the one that we can all add data into. It was created in the same way that you just created your own map, but this way, having this, we can all kind of crowdsource our collections into one map, which will be more interesting when we do the next step of the workshop. That's why I put it in here. So if you don't see that, go up to the top and just type in collaborative field. Oh, let's see. Let's actually, no, let's, yeah, that would be the right one. Collaborative field maps practice. And see how it just shows up. Let me know if that doesn't show up on your phone. If you're not within the UCANR organization, it won't. Good. I'm gonna just wait for a second. I know some people have to bring that up on their phone. I'll look at the chat. I'm gonna bring up the chat, make sure that I'm not missing anything. Oops. Expand this up. Chat. Okay, good. So people are seeing it. I see. All right, good. Not finding it. Rich, are you on the UCANR account? Okay. So if you, oh, UC Berkeley. Okay, that would be why. It has to be a UCANR account. If not, don't worry about it. That's why we created our own map, and we can always circle back and get the data from this later on for some people. But if you don't see that, type in the name of the map that we created earlier. So if you see that, that should be good. You can probably see whatever the field maps training map or whatever we called it. I don't remember. I have to go back and look at my what we did there. So anyways, even if you don't see it right now, I can proceed. Okay, you got your own map. Okay, so once you find your own map, you're good. But I'm going to go into the collaborative field maps practice app because it's just a more full-fledged thing of what we've already worked on. And before I do that though, I'm going to click on the 3 little dots to the right of that. And in there, that's where I can reload my map. I can add offline data, and I'm going to click on that right now just to show you what it looks like. And I can zoom in. You see there's a little square box, and it'll be really little until I really zoom in away. So I'm going to zoom into my neighborhood right here, and you'll see the box grows. Don't download anything right now because it'll take a few minutes. It's pretty as high detailed imagery, so it just takes too long and it uses up space on your phone. But I just wanted to show you that's how you download the data. So instead, I'm going to click the back arrow at the top, so it comes back to where I was at before. So that's the current map. Before I do anything further, instead of clicking on the map, I'm going to click on the little the account person at the top. On Androids, it's on the top right. I believe on iPhones, it's on the top left. It's the same thing, pretty intuitive. Clicked on my account. The reason why I want to show this is because this is the 2 things that potentially you might want to change here is your provider. This is where you can add a different provider like a BADL for one of the Garmin peripherals that you could add in there for higher GPS accuracy. So that's where you'd set something like that up. And the only other places is if you really want to stay with the units of like imperial units versus metric, this is where you can change it on units. So I'm going to X out of that now, clicking the X at the top right, or left, I mean. Good. Now you can reload it if you've already loaded it once. I'm going to click on this here, the 3 dots. You can view details. You can favorite this, which I should favorite this, honestly, because I use it so often. And I can reload the map. Or you can just click on it for the first time if you've never loaded it before. So I'm going to load the map on here. It's pretty simple using this, you'll see. So, and this should be basically the same thing with your map, that if you're using the one that you created, this should look really similar. What you'll do is go in and click the little plus at the bottom right corner. I don't remember what it is for an iPhone, but it's probably clear.
It's exactly the same, Sean.
Okay, good. So when you go into the in here, you can add a point line or polygon. I just did that by dragging up with my finger. Before we continue, what I will show you is the thing that Maggie really likes to do. Is cool. Is if you go, you click on the line, the new feature for the line, tree line, and click the 3 vertical dots, you can start streaming. I'm not going to do that right now, but if you click on that, it will kind of leave like a bread trail of points, vectors that create a line for wherever you walk with your phone once you start streaming. So that's kind of a neat thing. You can create maps for, I don't know, where you want to jog if you want to jog with your phone in your pocket, and then you can bring that into your web map and get a jogging map later on for that sort of thing. But yeah, that's where you can start streaming. But I'm going to X out of that at the top left-hand corner for now. Discard, yes. And I'm going to instead do the plus sign and then click new point feature. You can see here, this is where I can take a photo. I can select, if I click down here where the type of tree, no value right now, but if I click on it, you see the drop-down list. In this case, I have, like I said, this is much more full-fledged. So I know I have a redwood tree in my front yard. So I will click on redwood. And now you see, kind of like the other type of tree, I see I have a type of redwood option. So I can click on that and I get a drop down of a variety of redwoods. And I know my tree is a coastal redwood. And I could put in comments and then I could just click check. Good. So then it shows all the point information that is included in the pop-up information that you get. So real quick, let's go out for about 12 minutes and go collect some points around your area. Preferably, if you want to do it on the Native Trees of California app or the Field Map Practice app that we brought up to start with, the collaborative Field Maps Practice app, those will get piped all into one map that we can then use for our web mapping exercise next. But if you don't have that, don't worry about it. Just collect a couple on some points on yours to stretch your legs, and let's reconvene at 3:30 to see what our data looks like. Is there any questions? I think it's pretty intuitive on this, right? Okay, let's see. Okay, so the form is for Melanie's, the form is not showing up the way she wants it on the mobile app.
I can also clarify.
Okay.
I've been working on a point layer, and I will do the special formatting, like conditional values and things like that. And I'll save it, and then I'll try and open it on my work tablet, and it's all gone. And I'll go back into forms and it's all gone. The only thing that
I've had that happen.
The same was I didn't double click the new field. I always dragged them over, but otherwise I did everything the same.
Okay, so 2 things that have caused that to happen for me. One is if I forget to push that little grayed out save button at the top right-hand corner of the screen.
Yeah.
That'll do it. And also, if you change the symbology earlier on and it doesn't like the symbol that you have, that has caused that to happen for me as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I definitely have saved it. The first time I was
Okay.
like, oh, I probably didn't save it. So then I did it 3 or 4 more times.
Okay.
With saving it. But I kept the symbology pretty simple, but I did change. I think I changed the outline of the circles to different colors. So maybe I'll just change that back, and maybe it's that.
Yeah, I found 2 or 3 things earlier on that have broken it for me, and then it just doesn't show up like you're talking about. It's really weird.
Yeah, and I wasn't sure if it was my tablet, because I think it's 2018, or anything else, but it's good to hear that you've had that problem too. I'll work with
I thought they'd work those bugs out by now, but apparently not.
Yeah,
sometimes
it's driving me nuts.
Sometimes you have to I've had to recreate and go all the way through it, and then it works, and I don't know why.
And this is a pretty complex one with, multiple point
Oh,
layers with multiple fields and multiple options. So I was like, I can't recreate this. It took weeks, but
oh man. Well,
I'll
if
try
you,
the symbology.
yeah, and if that doesn't work, do the office hours. I can
Yes.
put on my thinking cap and try to remember all
Yeah.
the day. I've tried to break this every way I could, and I think yeah, I've broken it
Cool.
a lot of
Yeah.
ways. So,
If it doesn't work, I'll reach out to you and show
okay,
you what's
sounds
going
good.
on.
All
Thanks,
right.
And
John.
Melanie, if that does come up, go to if you look at the top of the chat window, we have the office hours. You can always
Yes.
sign up for an office hour
Yeah.
and we'd be more than willing to help.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to step
So-
away for a second myself.
Thank you, Maggie, for putting it in.
Yes.
I'm on it.
Awesome. All right. We'll be back in, about 8 minutes.
Okay.
All right. It's kind of a soft restart. I'll answer Sarah's question. So, do you have to do anything specific to set the map up to be collaborative? So that's where the sharing settings come in. Typically, unless you reach out to Esri and get them to work out some exception for you, you can only share editability of a feature layer within your organization. So anybody in your organization that has like a license can edit that. You can set up groups like I showed you, where you can limit the sharing access to just the groups that can do it. You can't right now do it to everybody. You can't open field maps, that is, up to open to everybody. You can do like geoforms and some other just web-based maps that you can fully crowdsource for anyone anywhere as long as they have an internet connection, but it's not going to be what's referred to as a native mobile application, because you can't work offline. You can't have just the really dedicated like synced data to your device and a bunch of other things that make it useful for, like, say, a scientific field campaign or a like data management project, that kind of thing.
Hey, Sean, I just want to
Yes.
mention, don't forget about survey. Hey, Sean,
Yes, I hear you.
I just wanted to say, don't forget about Survey 123. It does have some other capabilities and it can be shared with the public.
Yes, that's I did kind of mention that earlier. Good point, Shane. Survey 123 has a lot of the functionality in field maps comes from Survey 123 and Collector. It goes about it a little bit different. Survey 123 is another similar collection app where you can have cascading select and all that kind of stuff. You can't use it offline for crowdsourced data collection, where people that don't have an online account can use it, but you can share it with people. It is pretty useful. All right, so I think everyone's hopefully back. We'll just go through the next steps. They're fairly easy. What I've done is I've brought up what way you're looking at. So actually, if I refresh it, probably see any last minute updates that have been put in there. This is the layers is the Native Trees of California layer in the Collaborative Field Maps Practice web map. That one that I mentioned, I suggested that we use for crowdsourcing at least our small crowd, our 10 people, or 15 people plus, but instructors as well. But so our data collection is included right here. If I zoom in on my map and click on one of my dots, that I've collected 4 dots right at my house. So I'm going to toggle between a couple of them. And here's the redwood tree that's right in front of my yard. So I took the picture of that, but you see in the pop-ups that has this information at the top, and it's somewhat limited. This is where you can do your pop-up configuration over to the side here, where it gives you the optional settings and the expressions and the ways that you want to have this information portrayed. That's a kind of another workshop into itself, but just so you know, that's how you have, this is how the data is managed here. This is also where you can click and delete or move your points in. Just so to be clear, I am in the map viewer application here, looking at that collaborative field map practice. For those of you that were working with your own map, it's going to look maybe something like that with not much in it. I didn't add any in mine, so there's nothing in there. So that's that might be what you're looking at there instead of this. Where we're going to go with this, though, is more like this experience builder representation of the data, where we can have a bit of a legend. We can add in some features, which we won't do today because that's kind of, we covered that kind of stuff in the ArcGIS online workshop. We're not going to do whole computer cartography kind of workshop today, but you can really kind of make things pop out in the way that you want in this environment using widgets. So this is what we're going to work toward, with a title and a legend. Good. And how we're going to do that is, let's go back for everybody to one of your ArcGIS Online or your map, the map viewer window, and go to the shortcut cluster of dots at the top. So if you saw what I did, I went up just to any one of these, and I have several open. You might only have one or two open, but in here, go to the shortcut option and click Experience Builder. Good. And in your Experience Builder, there's going to be a whole variety of recent things that you've worked on. I'm not going to deal with them. The November field maps practice is the one I threw together right here. Oops, which one was it? The one I just showed you. That's the November field maps practice. But for you, you're going to want to create one from scratch. And so what you'll do is go up to the top right and you'll say Create New. This is kind of the neat part. Look at all these different options that you have. These are templates that have different layouts of where widgets might be, where you, just for time efficiency. I mentioned that the value of using the newer I don't know, ways that Esri has decided to go in creating your web maps and web mapping applications are really efficient. This is one that's really efficient, and that you have all these options right off the bat that you can pick from that have infographic and widget layouts that are useful. But for now, we'll just go with creating the basic blank full screen. So that's the top one on the left, and click Create. Now, there's going to be similarities between a lot of these, those templates that we were just looking at. And one of those is, and by the way, when you first bring this up for the very first time, it might not look just like this. What it'll have is down in, for those, what it might look like, and for me to get there, is there's this little question mark at the bottom left corner. And I can click Show Help Guide, as this is what you'll see. The nice thing about all those templates that we had right before this is that most of them, maybe all of them at this point, have this little question mark that'll give a tour of how to use this particular template. I'm not going to do that right now because it's going to get redundant. I'm going to go through a lot of the steps just with a little different kind of efficiency. But just knowing that help guide is there is good. I'm going to click skip to get out of that for right now, the bottom left-hand corner of that pop-up. Good. What we do want to do, though, is there's like some options over here. You got your widgets that are options. Then we have at the top inserting pages. You can do multiple pages. You can add data in there, and that's the first thing we'll do. We can do themes. To start with, let's add some data. So we'll click on that little disk stack, that layer stack there on the left, third one down. Click on that and click Add Data. So what you'll want to do is add in your one of your most recent maps. So you can do your your November field maps practice is the one I had. I'm going to do the collaborative field maps one here. If you're within our organization and you want to use the collaborative field maps, it might not show up because it's not your content, but I have shared it, I believe, with everyone in the organization. So what you could do is go up to my organization and then search for collaborative field maps practice. So if you take this, I'm going to just copy it for efficiency's sake, go up to my organization and put in here in the search that will show up there as well. So you might want to do that just because you'll have a kind of a more full-fledged map to look at the end. There's also the field maps practice. Back to my content. I'm going to go back to my content. You can also just enter in layers, but that's different, something else. I could also do the November one, but I'll just do the simple one for now. I'm going to collaborative field map practice. I check that, and I have too many things in my way. And then I'm going to go down to the bottom right-hand corner and click done.
Hey, Sean.
Yes.
We have someone asking if you can go back just a little bit.
Sure
They're
thing.
saying they don't see any of what you're seeing.
Okay, that makes sense. They hopefully, if they save the last one from the web map, it should be there. But in that, let me look at the chat.
Okay, sorry, it was me. I see what you see right now, but what you had before, I couldn't go to all those maps or anything. So from there, I don't know how. I don't
Okay,
have
it's
the
okay.
add data thing. I said
Okay,
have insert widget.
okay. So I'm going to back up then. I have to go. Actually, I am going to have to really back up. Back. Come on. All right, I have to get all the way back to here. Good.
Good.
So I'll do create new blank. Good. I'm on add data. Click on add data. So there's all these there's web maps galore that are all available. Those are all the ones do you see any web maps available?
Yeah, now I'm where you are now.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Well, in that case, I'm going to go to the collaborative field maps practice, or you can select your own, the one that you had available to you that you created, expect for those of you, a couple of you that are using other organizational accounts. Good. And so now that web map's in there, now I'm going to go back up to, actually, I'm going to switch down one more thing before I continue. I'm going to go down to the template on the bottom left, and I'm going to click dark. I just like the dark one better. It just looks better to me in some cases with the data that we're using, at least right now. Played with a couple of them. Isn't always necessarily that's the best one. Good. Now I'm going to go up to the plus sign again, and you'll see all these widgets that are available. What we'll do is I'm going to grab what you do is you click and drag these over onto your window. So see, I went up to the plus sign. I'm going to click on map, drag it over there, just the top left-hand corner for now, and drop it. And by the way, it's not going to look like much. It's going to look like a kind of a old school map of the world. But that doesn't matter. We'll come back to that in a second. I'm going to just drag this so it fills up my window the way I want it to. And since this is activated, I can select the map now that I want. And since I just loaded that content in, I can just go over to the right, select map, collaborative field maps practice, and there we have our dots. Good. And now that it's in, I can X out of that, and it looks fine. Now I'll add a new widget. This is all, by the way, this is a whole other course if we want to really dig in here and show how to put in like back layers and so forth. You just add more content, look for states, and then change the editing, that kind of thing. But for now, we're just going to make this simple. What I'm going to do next is put in a title. I don't remember where it's at. It's way down here, I think. Text. No, it's text I want. Yeah, text, not title. I'll click on text and drag that up to the top. Drop that in there. Now the text by default is going to be really teeny, but that's okay. We just start typing whatever we want. I'm going to say, oops. I'm going to double click in there. Trees of California. I don't remember what else I used before. But that little white, and that just doesn't work well for me. So what I'll do is over to the right, you'll see the properties that automatically pop up when that's active. And what I'll do is I'll change this to the size to something like 35. Click enter and it'll get bigger. That's not big enough still. I want something really big. Something more like 65. Enter. What the heck? Why does it still look small?
You gotta
there?
select the text.
What's that?
You gotta select the text. Happened to me as well.
Oh, it's because I'm on the side. Yes, of course. Good point. Yeah, so 35 should be around the right size if I remember right. See, I just did this yesterday or this morning, and yeah. So now that's fine, but I want to center it probably. So there's the center option over here. And the other thing is it's just not, it just doesn't pop out enough. So I'm going to bold it to give it a little bit more to it. And then there's also the background that you can change. There's the font changes, and then like next to that on this, and you can see that the highlight color is good. I'm going to click that background highlight color and give it another something like black. Good. So then when I click off of it and click entirely off of it, you see it's got this black. I have to adjust the frame of that so it stands out. And there we have, the trees of California. I can kind of center it on my map. So it's just highlighted a little bit more. So it's not too overwhelming, but it just pops out a little on the map. Good. I can also, I mentioned earlier, this is kind of neat, just something different than the past on some of your the web mapping applications, is you don't have to be stuck with the underlying web map, which is this for scale. You can adjust it in here, modifying the selected map, clicking custom to the right under map, click modify. It takes a second for it to come up. And then I can adjust the scale here. It still jumps and pretty quick in scaling, but then I click OK, and then it pops up a little bit better in the frame. Good. Now, the last thing that I want to do is I want to go and let's see, let's do a legend. Where the heck's the legend at? App-centric. Legend. Oh, is at the top. I was looking too far down. So I can bring over the legend, drop it somewhere where it's not in the way. Again, you also have to select to the right where the legend comes from, and you'll see the map. And then you'll have the options that are clear there. We didn't collect any lines or tree polygons, but they would pop up if they were. So we can adjust that so it looks a little bit nicer. And then we have just a decent rudimentary map, right? We got some points, they stand out. We got a title. Again, web maps usually don't need a north arrow. It's just not the way it works. And so we're good. But we do have to do a couple more things. Across the top, we might want to change the label, the title of the map. That's what people are going to see. So call it whatever you want, something intuitive, tree inventory of California. So that saves, and then we'll go, we haven't saved it yet. What we'll go is go over to the top, across the top, click the save button, and it's saved. Now we're going to go down and we can look at, you can save as, you can delete things. You don't want to do that. You can create new. We don't need to do any of that. You can change the sharing settings. That's one of the main things I brought this up. We don't need to change sharing settings right now, but if you were going to, you could change this here to make it so you can share it to everyone everywhere. So you can share it to everyone. I'm not worried about that right now. And then lastly, we would publish it and click publish after we change the sharing settings. If I had changed the sharing settings, what I could do is I could do preview. Where's the preview at? View published item. That's it. Used to call it preview. If this pops up, if I'd shared the sharing settings for everyone, I could copy this URL and send it to anyone, anywhere, and that would be the map. You can put that in an iframe for a website, whatever. This would be, as long as the sharing settings were changed where I just showed you at, where you could change them at. Good. And with that, that is the core part of the workshop. I think people asked questions as we went. I wanted to make sure that we finished up about this time so that we'd have a few minutes for questions. For those of you that are interested, I can show you really quick how to bring in this type of data into ArcGIS Pro, but I know that's not exactly what the workshop's about, but it's really kind of an exciting thing for those of us that do use this stuff kind of frequently. It's a really neat thing to see or use, the web integration with ArcGIS Pro. But other than that, so if anyone else wants to get off to their Thanksgiving vacation, hopefully, and I do wish all of you a really great holiday here next week. Yeah, please remember to fill out the evaluation form that Andy just threw in the chat. I just brought up the chat, saw that. Thanks, Andy. And you'll also probably receive an email that will come out. And sometime in the next week, I will put together the recording of this and publish it on our ArcGIS YouTube channel, which is really filling up with a lot of great content. And there's a lot of people are starting to look at that. So each of our workshop recordings go up there. I also will put in the comments or the description, the exercise, so you can download that there if you kind of lose track of it from your emails. But yeah, that'll be published usually like sometime early next week. Even though I'll be out, I'll still put it up. But with that, I will open this up for any questions, and then I'll do like about a 4 to 5 minute thing on how to bring the data into ArcGIS Pro, and we'll call it a day. All right, I'm not seeing anyone hollering out, so I'll jump straight to Pro and show you how that works really quick. Good. All right, so from this, I'm just going to reduce some of these things down, and I'm going to go into Pro and click on Pro here. It's on my, normally you might have to search for it in your apps if you don't have it in there. This is show and tell, unless you really want to follow along. This is, I'm going to bring up ArcGIS Pro, and just for efficiency, I'm just going to start without a template. Normally I might start with a map, designated location, but this is just going to be temporary. And once it comes in, I'm going to create a new map. Good. Now, so it took a second. There you go. I keep on moving my Zoom window right to the wrong place where I don't want it to be at. All right. Close the chat. All right. And then from what you would need to do to start with is you go up to your view and bring up your catalog pane. And in your catalog pane, across the top, you'll see portal. And in my case, I'd be working with my own content. But if it wasn't my own content, you might be working with your organizational, which I'll just go to that for now, because that's what it would be a lot of the time. And I'm going to look for the layer. So I had to figure out which one of these. The name of this, is the file name is the collaborative field maps is the actual map, but the layer that's within that is the let's see, trees, California trees. I have to look to see what is native trees of California is what I'm going to look for. I always forget what that is. So native trees of California is what I called the layers. So I'll type that in here. That should be enough to get me there. Good. Once that comes up, I'll right click on it and add to current map. You'll see all those points show up. You can zoom in here. Again, you can change, this is limitless or virtually limitless cartographic things you can adjust this with. But here's something that's really important, and it's a hassle if you don't realize that you need to do it, is in that layer, you should right click it and go to the properties. And oh, wait, I have to go all the way to the point layer. Right click the point layer and then go to the properties. Good, there we go. Go to cache is the halfway down, click cache. And then click don't cache any data locally. That's really important because it'll freeze, it'll jam up things if you don't do that. Once I've selected that, anytime I change and edit stuff here, it's going to be tied to the layer that's out there. If someone goes online and updates it, all I have to do is I could save this map, which I'm not going to do because it's just a temporary template. But all I have to do is refresh it, and all the data that's been collected in near real time will show up on my map right now in near real time. So so that's all there is to it. There's and if you want to make changes here, it can, as long as it's synced correctly, it will go the other direction. And with that, anything anyone wants to add? Shane, I know he's an expert at well, he's an expert at almost everything GIS that I've seen, but as far as is tying this, syncing this with your online data, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, Sean, I think you covered it really well. The only thing I would add is you don't just have to do the layer. You could actually search for the web map, and it would import the entire web map as another map inside of ArcGIS Pro.
That's a good point. Good point. Yes. All right. And with that, I think we can call it a day. That's there's all there is to it. I know that's all there is to it. There's actually a lot more to it than that, but that's a good, I think, a good start at this.
Sean, Bea asked a quick question, as did Sarah, but Bea, as long as the underlying data is shared to everyone, they can see it. But if there's any security on any of the underlying data in your web map, they'll still need a password and username to see it.
Yes, good point.
And Sarah, your question about coordinates and elevation, they may not show up initially. You just have to go on and turn that field on if they don't show up. But the field should be in the attribute table.
Yeah, and related to that, yeah, it's Beatrice's question. Yeah, once you publish it, if everything underneath the map, all the map features are all shared to everyone, then yes, everyone can see it. You just have to go back and then set your sharing settings in your ArcGIS Online. So if you go back to your, oops, wrong one. Go back to your ArcGIS Online content and then go into each of the features that are included in there or the web map itself and then set this sharing, then that's good.
And one addition to that, if you go to share it from the web map, it'll tell you that you have layers that aren't shared at the same level. And I believe it'll prompt you and say, do you want to change the sharing level of those layers?
All right. Well, hey, everyone, have a great holiday.